Nancy's neighborhood in the critical hours between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. Significantly, one vehicle speeding by just 8 minutes after Nancy's pacemaker disconnects from Bluetooth, flying like a bat out of H-E-double-L. Why? And tonight, online sleuths identify a star, a small star, black or blue in color, on the porch guy's jacket. Is it real? And if so, can it be used to track down the kidnapper? And in another development tonight, AI, artificial intelligence, was it used to write 2 of the ransom notes? And if so, there's a way to track it. Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. I want to thank you for being with us. Dave Mack, what is the latest in the search?
Savannah Guthrie took to Instagram and posted a clip from the Today Show in a segment about her mom and writes, "Please be the one that brings her home." And she also added, tips can be anonymous and the reward can be paid in cash. I don't think that's been said before, but we all know that tips can be anonymous if you want, but the reward can be paid in cash. She coupled that with releasing a shortened version of what the family released the other day. But Savannah Guthrie reminding everyone that tips are anonymous and the reward can be paid in cash.
First of all, tonight, that video found on a neighbor's cam, the door cam, the surveillance video at the edge of their yard, also catching 12 vehicles flying by at the time Nancy Guthrie is kidnapped. This from our friends at Fox News. Let's stay on the video. Dave Mack, what are we seeing?
Well, you're actually seeing Ring camera footage of a car about 2:36 in the morning. And Nancy, this is a home located about 2.5 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. It's a back road that leads out of her neighborhood, and it doesn't see a lot of traffic, not on a regular basis. Between midnight and 6 a.m., February 1st, about 12 cars went down that road in front of this camera. But right there, 2:38 a.m., a car goes flying by that camera, Nancy. That would be enough time from the time, or 2:36 a.m., I apologize. 8 minutes after Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker connected via Bluetooth to her Apple Watch, that car goes flying by that Ring doorbell camera, and you can see it. It's heading away. So that's what we're looking at, and that is really important that it's just outside of that 2-mile radius that law enforcement put up as the search area. This is 2.5 miles, but there it goes, right there, away from the neighborhood.
Straight out to Brian Fitzgibbons joining us, Director Operations, USPA Nationwide Security. He leads a team of investigators, seasoned investigators, that find missing people all around the world. Former Marine, Iraqi war vet, one expertise, extracting people from Mexico. Brian, thank you for being with us. What do you make of the video?
Yeah, this is really good development here in this case. And what you see is as this search is expanding beyond the crime scene, this is 2.5 miles away from Mrs. Guthrie's house. This is just a sampling of the leads that the FBI and Pima County have developed. And I want to mention that they are currently analyzing over 10,000 hours of surveillance video. So this is one small tip of the iceberg here that we're seeing, but they're going to start tracking down this vehicle as it was in the area at the right time. This is certainly a great lead for investigators.
For weeks, the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie had left investigators searching, families waiting, and the public demanding answers. News updates came and went. Search teams worked tirelessly, and officials carefully reviewed every piece of evidence. Yet despite all those efforts, one question continued to dominate the conversation. What really happened to Nancy Guthrie? Then, in a moment that immediately captured national attention, legal analyst and television host Nancy Grace stepped forward to share her perspective on the case. Her statement was direct, and it changed the tone of the investigation overnight. During a televised segment, Nancy Grace explained that cases like this often hinge on small details that are easy to overlook. She emphasized that investigators must focus not only on physical evidence, but also on behavior patterns, timelines, and the decisions made by people connected to the case. That insight immediately sparked discussion among experts and viewers alike. According to Nancy Grace, the most important clue might not be something dramatic or obvious. Instead, she suggested that the truth could be hidden within routine actions, movements, communication, or changes in behavior that seemed ordinary at the time but later became significant. Her words carried weight. Law enforcement professionals and analysts began revisiting key moments in the timeline of Nancy's disappearance. They reviewed reports, examined witness statements, and reevaluated details that had previously been considered minor. The renewed focus created a sense of urgency within the investigation. For many observers, Nancy Grace's comments felt like a turning point. She did not claim to have solved the case, but she made one powerful point clear. The truth was already within reach. Investigators simply needed to connect the right pieces. That message resonated across the country and pushed the investigation into a new phase of analysis and determination. Now the question was no longer whether answers existed. The question was whether investigators were finally looking in the right place. And to stay updated on every development in this case, like and subscribe to Dark Case File True Crime, where every detail matters. After Nancy Grace spoke publicly about the case, investigators and viewers began paying closer attention to one specific part of her message. She did not focus on rumors or speculation. Instead, she pointed directly to something she believed had been overlooked from the very beginning. A detail hidden in plain sight. During her analysis, Nancy Grace explained that in many investigations, the breakthrough comes when authorities re-examine the timeline with fresh eyes. She stressed that the sequence of events, who was where, at what time, and for how long, often reveals inconsistencies that can lead investigators closer to the truth. Her statement immediately caught the attention of law enforcement experts. According to Nancy Grace, the timeline surrounding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance contained moments that deserved deeper scrutiny. She suggested that even a small gap in time could explain how the incident unfolded and why certain actions happened when they did. That idea quickly gained traction. Investigators began reviewing records again, comparing witness accounts with phone activity, security footage, and movement patterns. They wanted to see whether any part of the timeline showed unusual behavior or unexplained delays. Then something unexpected surfaced. Analysts noticed a period of time that had not been fully explained during the early stages of the investigation. It was not long, just a short window, but it stood out because events during that moment did not align perfectly with earlier reports. To Nancy Grace, this was exactly the kind of clue that could change everything. She explained that when timelines do not match, investigators must ask hard questions. What happened during that gap? Who was present? And why had that detail not been clarified sooner? The renewed focus created momentum inside the investigation. Officers realized that solving the mystery might depend on understanding those missing minutes, moments that could reveal the truth behind Nancy's disappearance. If the timeline held the key, then uncovering what happened during that unexplained window could finally expose the truth everyone had been searching for. And to keep following every important update in this case, like and subscribe to Dark Case File True Crime, where every clue brings us closer to the truth. As Nancy Grace continued speaking about the case, one part of her analysis quickly stood out above the rest. She made a statement that investigators and viewers could not ignore. According to her, the turning point in cases like this often comes when authorities shift their attention from what is obvious to what is unusual. That idea immediately changed the direction of the conversation. Nancy Grace explained that investigators sometimes spend weeks focusing on large pieces of evidence, while smaller details remain unexplored. She emphasized that unusual behavior, even something that seems minor, can reveal critical information about what really happened. Her message was clear and direct. Instead of asking only where Nancy Guthrie went, investigators needed to ask who behaved differently before and after her disappearance. That statement created a new line of inquiry. Detectives began reviewing reports from neighbors, family members, and individuals who had contact with Nancy in the days leading up to the incident. They looked for patterns, changes in routine, unexpected movements, or actions that did not match normal behavior. During that review, investigators noticed something that drew immediate attention. There had been activity reported near Nancy's home at an unusual time. The movement was brief and had not seemed important when first documented. But after Nancy Grace highlighted the importance of unusual behavior, investigators returned to that detail with renewed focus. Suddenly, the timeline started to make more sense. Experts realized that the activity could help explain how the incident unfolded and why certain events happened in a specific order. It was not proof of anything on its own, but it provided direction, a path investigators could follow. For many observers, this was the moment the case began to shift. Nancy Grace's comments had done more than raise questions. They had encouraged investigators to look at the situation from a different angle, one that could reveal connections previously overlooked. And according to her analysis, the truth was getting closer. The next step would be to determine exactly who was responsible for that unusual activity, and what role it played in the events that followed. As the investigation moved forward, Nancy Grace returned to the case with another strong message, one that quickly captured the attention of both investigators and the public. This time, she focused on the importance of physical evidence and why certain clues should never be dismissed, no matter how small they appear. Her tone was firm. According to Nancy Grace, the truth in cases like this often lies in the evidence left behind. She explained that investigators must carefully examine every detail from the scene, because even the smallest object can reveal a critical piece of the puzzle. That statement sparked renewed urgency. Law enforcement teams began reviewing items collected during the early stages of the investigation. They rechecked photographs, re-examined reports, and compared evidence against the timeline that had recently become the center of attention. Then investigators noticed something important. A piece of evidence that had previously been documented but not fully analyzed suddenly stood out. It was not dramatic or obvious, but it raised new questions about the sequence of events on the night Nancy disappeared. Nancy Grace explained that this type of discovery often marks the beginning of a breakthrough. She pointed out that when investigators revisit evidence with new information in mind, connections begin to appear. Details that once seemed unrelated can suddenly fit together, forming a clearer picture of what may have happened. That was exactly what authorities were beginning to see. The newly examined evidence suggested that the incident may have unfolded more quickly than originally believed. It also indicated that someone involved might have made a mistake, a small error that investigators could now trace and analyze. For detectives, this realization created momentum. They understood that solving the case might depend on following the trail left by that single piece of evidence, step by step, detail by detail. Every new finding would bring them closer to understanding the truth. And according to Nancy Grace, the investigation had reached a critical point. The evidence was no longer just a clue, it was a direction. The next stage would determine whether that direction would finally lead investigators to the answers they had been searching for. As the investigation continued to unfold, Nancy Grace returned once again to discuss what she described as the most critical stage of the case so far. Her latest comments were direct, confident, and impossible to ignore. According to her, investigators had reached what she called the moment of truth. That phrase quickly spread across news outlets and social media. Nancy Grace explained that every major investigation eventually arrives at a point where the evidence begins to form a clear pattern. She emphasized that when multiple clues start pointing in the same direction, investigators gain the confidence to take stronger action and focus their resources on specific leads. In her view, that moment had finally arrived in Nancy Guthrie's case. Authorities had already reviewed timelines, re-examined evidence, and analyzed behavior patterns. Now, those separate pieces of information were beginning to connect. What once looked like isolated details were forming a single, consistent picture of how the incident may have unfolded. For investigators, this shift was significant. It meant the search was no longer just about gathering information. It was about confirming conclusions. Officers began narrowing their focus, concentrating on key locations and individuals linked to the timeline that Nancy Grace had highlighted earlier. According to her analysis, the investigation was moving from uncertainty toward clarity. She reminded viewers that progress in cases like this often happens quietly. Instead of dramatic announcements, breakthroughs usually come from careful verification of facts and steady coordination between investigators. Still, the atmosphere around the case had clearly changed. Law enforcement officials were working with renewed determination, and experts following the investigation began expressing cautious optimism. The growing confidence suggested that authorities believed they were closer than ever to understanding what truly happened. Nancy Grace ended her statement with a powerful reminder. "The truth does not stay hidden forever," she said. "It reveals itself when investigators follow the evidence without distraction." For many observers, that message signaled hope. The investigation had reached a turning point, and the next decision by authorities could determine whether the answers everyone was waiting for would finally come to light. And to continue following every major development in this case, like and subscribe to Dark Case File True Crime, where every detail matters.
Over 10,000 hours of surveillance video. So this is one small tip of the iceberg here that we're seeing, but they're going to start tracking down this vehicle as it was in the area at the right time. This is certainly a great lead for investigators.
Todd Shipley joining us, digital cybercrime expert, former Detective Sergeant, Reno PD. 25 years in law enforcement, author of Surviving a Cyber Attack, also author of Investigating Internet Crimes. You can find him at darkintel.info. Todd Shipley, thank you for being with us. How will the feds go about enhancing this video?
Well, they're going to take the screenshots out of it and try to figure out what they can find from that one particular shot and identify if there's anything that's usable in that shot. It's a pretty quick shot that's moving, so it's not something that's going to be an easy thing to do, but they're going to take that video and the stills and try to enhance whatever they can to find anything. Descriptions, bumper stickers, the license plate, obviously, if they can figure any of that out. The year, make, and model obviously is important because then they can start tracking down who owns those in the state and try to figure out, what potential list of suspects they might have who own that kind of car, and then start contacting each one.
Guys, this video from our friends at Fox News. Straight back to Brian Fitzgibbons. Brian, many online sleuths have identified the vehicle as being a Kia Soul. Let's see the mock-up of the Kia Soul. Now, Brian, as you and I have discussed on many, many occasions, car manufacturers change either ostensibly or subtly the design of a car nearly every year. And that appeals to, those individuals that like to buy a new car every year and always drive a new car.
Shine, shopping online.
That said, it can be subtle or very obvious. It can be a tilt up in the front lights. It can be a change in the number of tail lights. It can be any number of things, a subtle slope in the front windshield. But the point is, isn't it true, Fitzgibbons, major metropolitan areas, New York, Chicago, LA, Atlanta, they've got, of course, homicide. They've got robbery. They've got crimes on children. They've got sex crimes. They've got white-collar crimes. They have an entire fleet of people, investigators, that deal with nothing but car theft and recovery. Often busting wide open car theft rings that make millions and millions of dollars a year. Those guys and ladies can look at a car at a distance and tell you, oh yeah, that's a Kia Soul, that's a 2024, and this is how I know it. How do they do it, Fitzgibbons?
Oh, absolutely. And that's from thousands of hours of surveillance on the job that they're finely tuned to identify make, model, and year. And what I will say is, while this video is not necessarily the highest resolution that you would want, a lot of those key identifiers are there. The shape of the windows, the locations of the taillights. They can get a relative height and size of the tires. size of the vehicle in general. So a lot can be deduced from this, and I think that their assumptions will be pretty accurate.